Well, we're here with a very special guest. So, with Dr. Nigel Cameron, who was my ethics professor at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School back in the day, you might say. But also who gave me tons of helpful advice when I was thinking about doctoral work. And so I'm very glad that he's here with us to talk about his book about Dr. C. Everett Koop. He's here for a lecture for that and also for a session where we're talking about AI. But here we're going to talk about one of the greatest moral challenges. So, Dr. Cameron, I'm so glad you're here with us. What would you state is one of our great moral challenges at the moment?
Well, I think our greatest moral challenge is how we relate humans and machines. And I suppose thinking about my own efforts and what interests me. I mean, this is why I'm writing biographies, and I'm also talking about AI. I mean, I think that it's how we relate to our machines. Now, of course, you go back into caveman days and so on, and you create wheelbarrows and spades and all these basic tools, which have enabled human beings to become extraordinarily productive and wealthy and so on and so forth and organized. And at one level, we're just continuing developing tools. On the other hand, other things are going on at the same time. And now the tools can mimic us really very effectively and mimic us in some ways that are much better than us. How we live in a world in which we're going to have other intelligences, and in which also, of course, take another approach to this, in which those who produce these technologies and who own these technologies are going to end up running things unless we do something about it. So, I mean, I think, now, obviously there's a personal challenge there. I mean, what do I do? And what do I tell my kids and grandkids? And, how do I sort of spend my time relating to the sort of humanistic questions as well as the technological questions? But it's also, of course, it's a broader social challenge, because we're going to have to find ways to work with people who think differently about a lot of things, but maybe who could think in a similar way about the wonders of technology and keeping it under control.
So, it seems to me that one of the challenges is something new comes out, and generally, even if there's a little bit of a concern about it, that there seems to be mainly treating it in kind of a consumer type of way. Oh, here's something that's available. Here's something for me to consume, to purchase, to use. What do you think how do we move out of just thinking about the next thing, the next invention, the next technology being just another thing for us to consume?
Well, of course, one of the ironies of our entire situation is that the basic business model for many of these technologies is Madison Avenue. They're just advertising vehicles. I mean, somebody wrote somewhere, said that a third of the world's top mathematicians are working in Silicon Valley creating ads. The sophistication, I mean, Facebook and so on, other social media, getting your eyeballs, keeping them fixed, keeping them interested, finding ways to motivate you. And the goal of a great deal of this is just to buy stuff. Not only buy stuff, but I mean, this enormous investment in technology has at one level come to us as a sort of reduction. And of course, then we have Apple, which stands apart from the rest of this technology world in various ways, and essentially has become. I mean, I don't use Apple. I have good friends who do. It's all right, but I mean, it's a cult. I mean, you get into it, and they have these extraordinarily high design as well as high utility items. And then they persuade, many millions of people that it's time to upgrade or it's time to move sideways into something else. As a sort of farm, they have this huge farm full of people, and they just feed them, Now these things are happening at the same time, and these things are extraordinarily helpful. And I think it's very hard for us to, if you like, take a deep enough breath to sit down and say, well, wait a minute, what exactly is going on here? Rather than just, scroll to the next TikTok or whatever it is. And I think it's plainly a particular problem in families and schools. It's the case in the States and also in Europe that, rather curiously, after many years of widespread use of mobile phones and so on, a lot of institutions are now saying, no, now hold on, now you can't use those in class, or you can't bring them to school, and there are big fights taking place. There's this book came out recently saying, well, no devices under whatever age and so on. I suspect these are overreactions, but they do indicate some sort of healthy thinking about, well, wait a minute, what exactly has been going on here? I think from one point of view, the horse has bolted. I don't think we're going to disentangle ourselves from these technologies unless we go and live in cabins in the woods. But I think getting, not least getting kids, even little kids, quite apart from from college kids, to develop a serious critical disposition toward what is going on, so that this is the kind of conversation they're going to have over coffee, and over coffee, not constantly looking at their devices in the middle. A sustained conversation. And I would hope this is something you're modelling at Wheaton.
We certainly try. So one other follow-up. So some of the captains of industry, like Peter Thiel, other people like that, they also are kind of futurists in a way, and they seem to be somehow connecting all of this with. If you hear them talk about certain ways that they're thinking about society moving forward, society being better, because society's kind of slowed down. It hasn't advanced the way that people might have anticipated it was going to advance. So now this will help society to advance in a certain way. What is your sense about that sort of social architectural idea that those kinds of captains of industries have when they're using AI and these other tools?
Yeah, a couple comments. One is that I think these technologies have been having enormous implications for the economic structures within us. We're producing all these huge high-cap companies which just weren't there 20, 25 years ago, and giving those who control them enormous power over all sorts of areas of our lives. It's not like having an auto company, which is huge. It just sells cars. You get Microsoft and you get Google and so on, and they're engaged in every conceivable area of our lives.
Right.
You have that happening, but I think from another perspective, I don't see technology changing human nature. One of the most fun things I was asked to do about 10 years ago, there was a conference in Lisbon in Portugal, run by a thing called the Champalimau Foundation. It was a conference about the world in 100 years' time. And we had all sorts of very distinguished people there, plus me. In fact, my speech is on YouTube. I still watch it. It's quite good. But looking forward 100 years, and one of the points that I made is that, look, we have to assume that developments in technology and drugs and all these other things are not going to change human nature. We will still be, Jekyll and Hyde. We'll still be these creatures who have such extraordinary heavenly capacities and yet hellish capacities to go with them.
Right.
And that's not going to change. And therefore, the decisions we make in our societies about issues of equality, issues of distribution of wealth, issues of the sort of social state and so on, these decisions are not going to be solved by these technologies. They may create an awful lot more wealth, but the pressures to have that wealth shared around are going to be the same as they are now.
Right.
And it's interesting, I about maybe 15, 20 years ago, I hung out a lot with people who were then calling themselves transhumanists. And so really some very interesting people. And Thiel used to go to their conferences and help to fund some of their stuff, but he said, I don't actually agree with a lot of what you guys are saying. I've got my own view of it. But I liked what they were doing because they were at least putting themselves in the position of taking seriously the fact that we are developing technologies which they would say would take us beyond being human. Now, we're not all going to live in the cloud, but that's the sort of talk they had. But they were raising these questions. And it interested me a lot that there are kind of two groups among them. There are those who basically are sort of gung-ho capitalists, let the chips fall, and which is the way things are going. We have these enormous companies now with enormous amounts of wealth sucking up our lives. And the others among them are fairly serious socialists. And they either believe that it's going to be so wonderful because when we hit the next level, there'll be this redistributive necessity, or that we should be fighting for it. Now, the logic of that argument is that, if we end up destroying what we now call full employment, it's not a technical economic term, but it basically means people won't get jobs, can usually get them. if that's not going well, then you lose elections and so on and so forth in democracies. If it is the case that we're going to have to restructure the way we look at employment, because there simply are not that many jobs to go around, then it will force us into a very different way of looking about resource distribution, which could be very healthy. I'm no fan of the so-called basic income, the notion that everybody should be basically paid a kind of pension. Partly because partly because it reeks of socialism, so it will never go down very well in a country like the United States. Partly because it inhibits people's ambition, career drive, the structures of careers, and so on. If basically everybody, can sort of live off the state. So I think it's rather dumb. I think what we should be doing is looking at controlling retirement ages to maintain full employment. Employment really is taking hits, which I think already it is. All these big tech companies are laying off tens of thousands of people. This is just the start. Then we shouldn't be pushing up retirement ages, which is what every country's been doing over the last 30 years for good reasons, but reasons that were good 30 years ago.
Right.
And so we should be looking to reduce retirement ages to maintain full employment. And it's very interesting. If you get up in the morning, if there's nothing to do, if this is because you're unemployed, this is hell. If this is because you got early retirement, this is heaven. And it costs about the same. And so I think we will need to structure our economies so that early retirement becomes the way that economies deal with a loss of jobs. And I think this is one of the hopeful things, and we may end up with people actually being able to lead fuller, longer lives with more leisure and so on, and with more interplay between leisure activities, voluntary activity, voluntary work and employment in the mix, if the number of jobs basically does start going down. But I think it's interesting that you've had this competition among those who've thought most about these things. Some of them are pretty weird people, but they've been doing this thinking, and some of them just don't care, and it's all about economy. And the others among them really are looking at redistributive models, which will counter the rule of the Elon Musks and so on.
Wow. Lots of food for thought.
Probably too much.
No, it's good. Thanks a lot. I appreciate it.
Great.